Welcome to today's video where I'll be reviewing the recently released trading card inspector played on the Steam Deck OLED. Just a warning that this game has a 1-bit visual style, so I hope it's not too harsh for you visually. If it is, I've got an easy fix for you. Just look away from the screen. But keep listening. I'm not trying to be funny, but it's the most practical solution and the whole game is like this, so not much I can do. If you're lazy and can't be stuffed to watch the whole thing, skip ahead for the too long didn't read and see whether this game is worth your money and what I'd rate it out of 10. So, what is Trading Card Inspector? From the devs of the game, Daydream Gallery, their website describes their game as a uniquely styled, chilled out, Papers, Please map set in the cutthroat, absurd world of Habubus Corporation. Basically, you inspect trading cards and give valuations for legitimate cards and dispose of cards that are illegitimate. To start with, we'll talk about gameplay and kind of touch on parts of the story as progression through the story affects other parts of the game. However, I'll circle back to story in itself as there are elements that aren't attached to gameplay which deserve to be discussed on their own. At the start of each level in story mode, you'll see your desk. In the middle with the largest area is your desk space where you can look at documents in greater detail and inspect cards. The left margin is where you keep documents and tools so they're not taking up space on your desk. The margin on the right is the business end. This is where you can apply the value of the card and have it sent from the outbox at the top if it's legitimate, or you'll put the card in the bottom part to shred it if the cards are illegitimate. On the right, it also shows your health, in that for each card you either incorrectly shred or value, it'll take away a heart and you will fail the level once you're out of health. In order to pass a level, you will need to value a certain amount of cards correctly. For instance, one level may need you to value 7 cards correctly. That can be either giving the correct value on a legitimate card or destroying illegitimate ones. In the left margin, you will have guides on how to correctly value a card and identify illegitimate ones. There are also some rules that are hard rules which you must obey regardless of whatever else is going on. Now, there's a bit of quick maths that needs to happen when you're valuing cards, so if you're someone that enjoys maths or having an element of that in games, you'll enjoy it here. It's not hardcore maths. If it was, I definitely wouldn't be playing this game. Some light maths isn't the only thing that requires a bit of brain power playing this. You'll also be flexing those brain muscles responsible for memory and quick decision making. At later parts in the story mode, it becomes advantageous to memorize at least some of the rules to help you identify cards as legitimate or illegitimate quicker. You'll also have to make quick decisions in the later stages of story mode, as you can't spend such long times going back and forth checking your guides and verifying the card like you may do at the beginning when you're learning. The cool part is after a while you do find yourself getting much better at the process. It's actually quite rewarding to go from having to constantly refer to a document to check your initial assessment is correct to glancing at a card and immediately identifying whether it's legitimate or not. Story mode does a great job of acclimating you to the basics of the game before throwing in more elements at each level for you to juggle alongside the base elements you're first introduced to. At that point in story mode, the game then starts throwing you what's called modifiers. Modifiers are temporary adjustments you're required to follow that affect the way you either value a card or affects your workspace. For example, a modifier can be as simple as earthquakes moving your documents and cards around on your desk, causing some annoyance and inconvenience, all the way to something more complicated like certain types of cards requiring to be valued by half more or less than usual valuation. What also makes the modifiers tricky is that they're not implemented for the entire level, so you can be valuing cards normally one moment and then you're informed a modifier is now suddenly active. It can also stop suddenly, so if you're not observant, this can trip you up with incorrect valuation. Story mode also introduces modifiers in a thoughtful way. They don't start with a crazy modifier off the bat. They give you modifiers that are a bit easier to understand to start with before introducing more trickier ones. I will commend the design choice to not include time limits for the most part. There are some modifiers that are time sensitive and they don't really appear until the later stages of story mode. In general, there is no time limit for you to complete a level and the game is better for it, not only from a gameplay difficulty perspective, but also because this allows you a bit of space to stop and just enjoy parts of the game for a bit when you discover something for the first time. I'll speak on this a little bit more later on. That's basically the gameplay loop. You get cards, you value them or destroy them, and when a level is complete, you then get rewards based on your performance. While it seems pretty simple, sometimes simplicity is the best thing you can have for a game. Starting off in the first maybe 7 levels, I really sucked at this game, but I never felt like giving up. Instead, I was more interested in learning where I went wrong and attempting to correct it on my next try. To also be fair, it's not until later levels where decent frustration may set in with those time-sensitive modifiers. I do think some people will be annoyed enough to stop playing there, at least for a time. However, there are some other things I'll discuss further on that does help mitigate the frustration. I also enjoyed the feeling when I cleared a level, especially if you clear it perfectly, meaning you didn't assess a card incorrectly once. That's a really satisfying feeling to get. Interestingly, with story mode, if I did fail a level, sometimes it felt like the game would try and compensate and make it easier for me to pass the level on my next attempt. I don't really mind this for story mode. I don't think it's beneficial to prevent people from progressing with so much resistance, especially as there's no option to change the difficulty on story mode. When you're successful in completing the level, you'll be rewarded with in-game currency, which is dependent on your performance, and like any good corporation, you can take that same pay you receive from your employer and give it back to them with purchases at the company store. You can get a couple of cosmetic items and visual customization options, like a background image for your desk or a different color palette. My favorite at the moment is the Game Boy Green color palette, which I find to be very nostalgic. Beyond that are items and upgrades you can get. Some of the upgrades are one-time purchases for things you can use once or multiple times during a level, like an I don't know button where it functions like a skip, or phone a friend where your phone indicates whether a card seems to be invalid or valid. As I mentioned before, some of these upgrades are really helpful with either nullifying a modifier or giving you an advantage, which is very useful for those time-sensitive modifiers. Other things you can purchase are more on the amusing side, like a magic 8-ball. You can also get card packs to get new cards to value, which we'll touch on shortly. As we've mentioned visuals and color palettes, let's now discuss the visuals and aesthetics of the game. What made this really stand out when I was browsing the shop page was the 1-bit aesthetic, just 2 colors and the hand-drawn feel of the trading cards and characters. I get a huge dose of nostalgia just from the aesthetics and visuals alone. For me, it makes me think back to NES games and even strangely early 2000s Newgrounds.com. The hand-drawn feel to the trading cards and characters also give the aesthetics a nice charm, and I think it was a good choice over, say, going for a pixel art type of style. It's a good contrast what they have at the moment, and the juxtaposition just makes the visuals pop. I also want to point out that these cards are pretty hilarious. I did have some moments where I was given a new card to grade during a level, and either it's the name or picture or both that got a laugh out of me. Again, not having a time limit in general is good for these moments where you do have space to enjoy the cards. This also makes collecting the cards neat, as you kind of are curious to see what other crazy cards the devs have cooked up. The descriptions for the cards are also pretty funny when looking through the collection once you're back into the menu options. The only time I've had some sort of trouble visually was with the numbers on cards when you're doing evaluation. Sometimes I'd have to check the card very closely as the visual style sometimes isn't so clear when zoomed in. However, I think this is more of an issue when I was playing with the Steam Deck docked, so I don't think of it as being an issue with the game, as it looked fine in handheld mode. I also need to take a moment to speak on the soundtrack to this game. There's a particular soundtrack that is banging, and this is probably the first time I've played a game and considered purchasing the soundtrack separately if it was available. This one song in particular is such a banger that when I first heard it, I stopped playing and just started rolling the shoulders as the music was going. This is why you see my cursor not moving at this point, because I was too busy doing this. Again, coming back to what I mentioned about having space to appreciate the game, it was nice to be able to just enjoy the music without stressing too much about completing the level right then. Now let's talk about the story of the game. We're playing as a card inspector and we work for the Habubus Corporation, who are owners of a trading card game. We start off as just humbly assessing trading cards and doing our job. Eventually things happen and there's corporate espionage, conspiracies, undercover agents, and so on. It all gets a bit fantastical and off the rails, but the way the story unfolds and how the world building happens is well executed. The story isn't told in a way that we expect with cutscenes or direct interaction with other characters. Instead, we receive notes and memos. These notes and memos sometimes will be written by a character and addressed directly to you. We also don't know much about these characters themselves. A lot of memos and notes are just signed with things like CEO, assistant, or something like that. This leaves us to fill in the gaps for this character in our minds, using only the content and tone of their memos and notes as something to work off. For example, some of the notes and memos about the CEO gives me heavy Michael Scott from The Office vibes, and it even makes it funnier for me when one of the reasons for a modifier the CEO implements is just due to vibes. So for me, the CEO of Habubus Corporation is less a bad guy and more just someone making dumb decisions due to incompetence. There are also some choices you can make that influence how the story plays out, which explains the branching levels in the story mode overview. This adds some replayability as you can go back to make different choices and see how the story progresses and pick up different modifiers along the way. And lastly, the notes and memos are pretty funny themselves. One moment there's a note saying there's no layoffs happening, and the next an entire department has been made redundant. It's extra funny for me as someone who likes a bit of dark humor and has experience working an office job. These notes just sound like unhinged middle management. Story mode also feeds into the game's other mode, which is endless mode. Like the name says, endless mode is basically endless until you run out of health. The great thing with endless mode is you can choose the modifiers you like or have no modifiers at all. The more modifiers you have active means you'll get more of a reward once your run ends. To unlock modifiers, you get them by playing through story mode. Even when you do an initial complete playthrough, you will want to replay levels to get other modifiers you would have missed out on. The other benefit of endless mode is that you can grind it for in-game currency in a way that suits you instead of exclusively replaying levels in story mode. For myself, for example, at one point, to have a better chance of completing the last level, which was getting a bit hectic with the modifiers, I needed to buy an upgrade in the store that would help me. I was able to do a comfortable grind in endless mode without any modifiers stressing me to pay for the upgrade before reattempting the level. Like previously mentioned, the review for this game is primarily concerned with the experience on a Steam Deck OLED. I played most of this while docked. Keyboard and mouse just feels better to use since you're doing a lot of dragging of documents around the screen constantly, but there is no issue playing this on handheld mode. The trackpads work well and are comfortable to use. Before we head to the too long did it read, I did want to add some things that occurred to me during my review that changed the way I looked at this game, and I guess the way I look at this genre of game too, as I'm fairly inexperienced in it. This is a beautiful game if you're unemployed or maybe even retired, and I kind of find it humorous, but I'm being dead serious here. I'm thankful I've got a job, but back when I've been between work, I think this would have actually been a great game to play. The reason is not in a bad way, but if anyone has ever worked in office or corporate job or done something like admin or data entry or anything like that, this game gives you that same feeling. Every time you get to a new level, you're presented with fresh documents. You'll check everything first and then get set up before assessing your first card. This is just the same as when you're in an office. You come in, you check your emails for any new updates and changes, check if any changes to process happen before you go about your workday. And that's why I say this game would be great if you're unemployed or retired. It kind of gives you a bit of routine and helps you cheat your mind by making it feel like you did. And of course, that's not to say you just play this game and stuff, but you know, when you're sending out CVs and going to interviews, you can't be doing it the whole day. There's gonna just be downtime in between, and I guess playing games like this would be a good alternative. And again, humorously, on the other side of that is if you are already employed, this may be a bit too close to work for you. I tend to do my reviews at night after everyone in my house is asleep. I get home from work, do my dad duties, and then try to create my content. This isn't a mark against the game, but for other games I've reviewed, even though I've only had a little sleep the night before, work the full day, then try to summon the last of my energy to create my content, I've managed to stay awake enough to get through my gaming session despite how tired I am. With this game, because some elements have a similar feeling to work, and no, I'm not a card inspector, it kind of feels like an extension of it, and I just naturally start checking out. So again, not to knock this game, just something to be aware of, especially if you're new to this genre of game. If you are a fan of work simulators, chances are you're wired differently and will love this. After some time with this game, it's changed my thoughts around this genre. For a lot of games I've seen, I truly did wonder why someone wants to simulate being a bus driver or a cashier, just normal everyday jobs, but I think I found my answer after playing Trading Card Inspector. Now we're at the too long didn't read part of the game, where we get to the crucial part of the review. What do I rate the game, and is this worth the money? To start with, I enjoyed this game. The dev team behind this is a 3-person team. This started as a submission for a contest, I think, which did well, and then they fleshed this out further from there, and we got this game. For a 3-person team, I think this is a pretty solid offering, especially as this game is their debut. I like their take on the work simulator genre along the same vein as Papers, Please. However, it would be a disservice to say this is just Papers, Please, but for trading cards, there are some good ideas here that are executed well, and I can see there was a lot of fun and playfulness in creating this game. I give Trading Card Inspector a very solid 7 out of 10. Is this game worth your money? I bought this on Steam for $11.25 New Zealand. That's roughly the cost to buy my lunch on a work day if I'm too lazy to pack it. That's a pie and a sausage roll with a V energy drink to wash it all down. Would I rather the lunch or Trading Card Inspector? This game was worth the purchase. All up, I've probably spent maybe 10 plus hours in the game in total, and I haven't collected everything. I'd happily recommend this to others who are lovers of this genre and anyone looking for something different with a bit of charm. Based off this experience, I'll keep an eye out for what the devs bring out in future. Also, a side note, if any of them are watching, I'd love an actual trading card game of Plabos and the characters in this game with a bit of expansion on the world they've established. That'd be pretty cool. That ends my thoughts on this game. If you've played Trading Card Inspector, please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Until the next one, take care and off.